Hi everyone, I'm Bear and you're watching Bookies. Welcome. So today we're going to review Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. And Katabasis is the ancient Greek word for descent. And the subject of this novel is a descent into hell. So the title makes perfect sense, right? This was my first read of any of the novels by R.F. Kuang. And I've been a little intrigued by her primarily because I'm just curious how it's all going to work out. So, what I mean by that is she has a pretty excellent educational background, a degree in international economics from Georgetown, postgraduate degrees from Oxford and Cambridge in Chinese studies, and she's currently working on a PhD at Yale. So, my curiosity there is sometimes educational attainment, I think, can be an impediment to good writing. And so, what do I mean by that? If you looked at my review of The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong, I was pretty critical of Ocean Vuong because it just felt to me like the author was unnecessarily using very fine language, and it didn't seem to fit the context of the story, and the really flowery language didn't really advance any of the plot. So I was kind of curious and a little leery here as we take on Kuang as to whether that was going to be the same thing because of her educational background. And I'm very pleased to say that it indeed is not. This is an excellent novel, so creative. I could tell just about 50 pages in that I had absolutely no reason to be concerned. The novel is excellent. I'm giving it a 4.75 stars out of 5. I'm so pleased with the novel that I fully intend to go around and read every one of her novels just to see if they measure up to this particular one. The entire framework of the novel is academia, whether it be Cambridge itself or hell. Kuang even models hell after a university campus. So I would describe this novel as kind of a modern remake of Dante's Inferno, and the work of others, for example, Virgil, which describe hell as entirely fictional. However, in this novel, those fictional works are considered guideposts to navigating hell. The protagonist in this novel is Alice Law. She's studying to pursue a postgraduate degree in analytical magic at Cambridge. After an accident, she determines that she must go into hell to correct the error if she can. And she's joined in that endeavor by another postgraduate student, Peter Murdoch. Both Alice and Peter have as their doctoral advisor Professor Jacob Grimes, and it's Grimes that is in hell that they must retrieve. I'll start with a quick description of Peter. Peter is everything that Alice is not. He's self-assured. He comes from a wealthy British family. He's uncommonly brilliant, absent-minded, inadvertently oblivious to everyone and everything around him, but in a way that's not off-putting and is frankly kind of charming. And he's kind, humble, and helpful to others in a way that is not condescending. In contrast, Alice envies, resents, and kind of hates him despite his kindness because it all comes so easy to Peter. Peter's going to make his way in the world without striving. In contrast to Peter, Alice needs help, and she'll do just about anything in order to be able to live the life that she thinks is the only one that's worth living, the life of the mind in academia. At the cost of half their lifespans, assuming that they can return from hell, Peter and Alice take the plunge into hell to retrieve Professor Grimes. And hell is described as having 8 levels, essentially, and each is kind of characterized by a vice or sin. So, for example, wrath, desire, pride, lust, cruelty, violence, tyranny. The reader's going to experience the flavor of each of those vices as Alice and Peter work their way through those levels of hell. There's no heaven and hell. It's just hell. It's a much more Roman and Greek concept of hell where everybody goes there despite whether they were good or evil in their natural lives. In this novel, all the dead go to hell, and they remain there until they're able to fully admit the truth about themselves. In short, hell is a mirror. It's a mirror. So you're looking in the mirror of hell, and it's revealing to you your own sins and vices, and you need to admit them if you wish to escape. The end goal is for the souls to make their way through hell and then be reincarnated anew at the end. That's it. And so if Peter and Alice are going to find Professor Grimes, the best way to do that is to try to figure out what vices or sins he was most inclined to in his natural life and go to that level of hell and seek him out. However, the problem, at least from Alice's mind, the problem is that he kind of doesn't have any of those sins. She knows better, but she reviews the life of academia as being so high and that of magicians as being so high that magicians avoid those gross sensual pleasures that the rest of us might indulge in. They're above it. And therefore, because they're above it, Grimes is going to be hard to find because she can't figure out where he might be. But the natural fact is magicians are terrible at getting through hell. They think they're different, and they justify their faults and their sins by, well, it was in the pursuit of excellence in research, so it's justified. And really what that is ego, right? Pride, if you want to put a level of hell to it. Is that assumption that reason and the pursuit of truth essentially inoculates you from vice? Is that false? Of course it is. Professor Grimes is a terrible person, but Alice and Peter can't really see this because they're kind of blinded by their admiration for the man. So as it relates to character study, that's kind of the lay of the land. Alice, highly driven, just merciless. She'll do anything to succeed. Peter, absent-minded, brilliant, silver spoon in hand, that kind of thing. And Professor Grimes, in hell, terrible person, just an awful person. As you read the novel, you're going to be introduced to a system of magic that Alice and Peter deploy, and it's actually really creative and quite unique. So I kind of want to describe it to you because it's going to be helpful for you as you read it to understand it. And in the system of magic, all you have to do is find a set of premises, even for a split second, that makes the world seem other than what it is. That you can suspend belief just for a moment. And in that moment, that's when the spell gets efficacy. It gets its power. And here the reader is introduced to paradox. The thumbnail of the video has one such paradox. It's the liar's paradox. The liar's paradox is this. It's one sentence. This statement is false. If that statement is true, then the sentence is false. And if the sentence is false, then it can't be true. It's in that moment of confusion that the spell gets that little spark that allows it to just bloom forth and have power and efficacy. It's in the moment that you can realize the paradox that the magic can occur. And I've been looking around on social media as people talk about this book, and I've noticed that a lot of readers have concern that they won't be able to understand it because there's a lot of reference to paradox, rhetoric, logic, philosophy. But I want to assure you that when references are made, they're usually explained and it's not complicated. So, don't fail to read this novel because you might be intimidated by philosophy, rhetoric, logic, paradox. It's okay. You're going to be fine. and just lean into it even heavier, because it's such a creative idea for a novel. Besides, I assume that you're a reader because you like ideas, you like concepts. So take on the challenge. I assure you it's not going to be a problem for you. And I really find this novel, even though it's fantasy and it has magical elements and high academia and the mirror construct that it's set in hell, even though those fantastic elements are ever present in the novel, it's really about character. And here I'm going to talk about Alice's character. To be perfectly honest with you, Alice is a very unlikable character. She just is. The whole notion behind the novel of going into hell to retrieve Professor Grimes is entirely self-serving. It, Alice doesn't want to go to hell to get Grimes because she respects him or likes him or feels like he's just a soul that needs to be saved. Quite the contrary. It, there could be an element of revenge involved, but there's definitely an element that is self-serving. She simply needs Professor Grimes to advance her career aspirations. He can't do that from hell, so she needs to bring him back. It's really that simple. And to a certain extent, I can understand Alice a little bit. She wants to live in her mind. She wants to live a life of concepts and ideas and magical thinking. And I think as readers, we can all understand that. Like I said before, we read because we enjoy the notion of ideas and concepts presented to us in our minds, and our minds interplay with the art to give a fully functioning picture in our heads of what the author is trying to convey to us. To that extent, we're kind of like Alice. What Alice has that you and I don't have is the desire to climb over everybody and do whatever you have to do in order to achieve that. You know, at the end of the day, I'd just rather be a good person. Alice is judgmental. She sees others as objects to be overcome and used and defeated and left in an ash heap so she can stand on them and climb her career ladder. She's untrustworthy. She's suspicious. Worst of all, she projects onto others, for example, Peter, the qualities that she has, because she can't see that there's something wrong with her. So she projects her emotions, her sins, her faults onto Peter with the assumption that he must share them too, because that's perfectly normal. And as noted before, Peter's everything that Alice is not. And the novel really explores the tension between Peter and Alice. There's two entirely different personalities, clouded also by a little bit of a misunderstanding and a backstory, a romantic interest between the two. But the bottom line is Alice views Peter as an obstacle. And in contrast, Peter only wants Alice's good. The tension in the novel is really whether Alice is going to learn anything. Will she reject the unexamined life that she's leading as she's going through hell? And I mentioned prior that hell is like a mirror. It's reflecting upon her and giving her the ability to contemplate her own faults and sins. And is she going to have the mental fortitude and humility to actually examine her own life? And what I mean by that is she going to be able to drop these faults and these qualities that she has and open herself up to love and understanding? I did mention earlier there's a little bit of a love story here, and frankly, I think the love story is a bit underfed. It's not really developed that well, and in my thinking, that's one of the faults in the novel. It's kind of an afterthought that becomes a conclusion. However, don't be concerned. This novel is highly entertaining. Along the way, Peter and Alice are going to meet deities, Some of them helpful, some of them not so much. They're going to interact with some of the shades in hell. Some help them willingly, some not so much. And did I mention that if you die in hell, you don't reincarnate? So the stakes are high and there's great peril throughout the novel to both Peter and Alice, while realizing that there are some classics like Dante's Inferno that have addressed this subject matter. This novel is super creative, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. And with that, I'm going to conclude. If you like this content, please like the video, and more importantly, subscribe, because as we build this channel, we're going to be able to do a lot more fun things with it. And ultimately, I think we're going to do some good with it, which I can describe in a later video. But for now, have a great day and God bless.